Hello and welcome, everybody. I see you're all joining in right now. I just want to take the time to say welcome and introduce myself as well as our group today. My name is O'Shea Taylor. I am one of the new student transition coordinators here at Student Community Leadership Development at York University. Today we have our first of a series of sessions geared towards parent and family.
Are you on mute?
Nope. Is everyone hearing me okay? All good, all good. Sorry about that. But yeah, I was going to say today we have our first in a series of sessions geared towards you all as parent and family and supporters of incoming, potential upcoming students to York University. I just want to say thank you and welcome. Um, we're going to have today's session led by one of our co-partners, Dr. Nona Robinson, Vice-Provost Students here at York University, is kind enough to be joining us and will be detailing and answering the question, why is York the right choice? We'll be going through all different details and information regarding York University, and that will be beneficial to you as parent and family members in supporting a student in making the right choice of choosing York University. Before we get started, though, I'm going to pass it off to one of my colleagues, Ariba, who's going to go over a little bit of assessment and kind of get a sense of the room of who's joining us here today and where you're all here from and what you're hoping to learn and take away from the session. So, Ariba, I'll pass the floor to you and take it away.
Hi, everyone. So I'll just be sharing my screen. I have a little Menti presentation here for you all. So if you go to menti.com and put in the code that you see on your screen, so 65129944, this is just to gauge the audience, see what our audience is looking like. The first question is just to please tell us which city or country you're joining us from, just to get to know where you're coming from. You know, it's a virtual session, so we'd like to get to know you as best as we can. So again, if you just go to menti.com, the code is also in the chat as well as the link. And we'll just wait for some responses. Okay, wow, already diverse. Markham, Brampton, Ontario, Canada, me too. Toronto, me as well. Anywhere else? So the bigger that the words get, meaning that there's more people from that area. So lots of folks from Toronto. Belize. Wow, I wish I was in Belize right now. Richmond Hill, very Ontario based. Mississauga, lots of people from Ontario. Mississauga's catching up to Toronto now. Okay. Kenya, nice. Aurora. Okay, it's looking like the board's stopped moving, so we'll move on to the next question. Let me just, oh, okay, never mind. Still moving. Turkey, Bangladesh. Very nice. This is very diverse now. Like I'm getting FOMO because I want to be in all these other different places because Canada's weather is not great right now, but I feel like it's getting better. Honduras, very nice. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Let me just make the screen bigger. We're still moving. Let me hold on for a second because we're still moving. Toronto is looking like a bigger population now. Mississauga, and then Canada. Lots of these other different places too, though. I think folks are still joining the Menti, so I'll give everybody another like 10 seconds. I don't know if that helps, but 10 seconds for anyone joining still. Okay, let's move on. To our next question. What brings you to today's session? So I've seen some people already responded, which is great. Lots of people that are looking to learn more general information about York University, which is great. This is the perfect session for you. Also, some parents or family members that have upcoming spring summer students. Okay, couple of incoming summer students, and then some other unknown category. Very nice. I think we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, some also responses here. Please rank the following York-related topics that you would most like to learn more about. So we have enrollment and finances, which is a big concern, you know, very, very understandable. Student community organizations. York has great organizations and clubs and all these things. It'd be great to learn some more information about that. I get where people are coming from. Campus recreation and athletics is next. Campus buildings and residency after that. York history and values. York has a great and diverse history, so love that. Commuting and city transit also. Oh, that's rising up now. Yeah. Okay, if everyone is good to go, or any last minute responses to this one. Enrollment and finance is still at the top. So hopefully we'll be able to cover a lot, if not all, of your the topics that you would like to learn more about. Community and city transit's rising up now. Okay, campus recreation, close fourth right there. Okay. If everyone's gotten in their responses, I see some people are still joining us, so maybe we'll give them a second as well. Okay, so great responses. Thank you, everyone. I will pass it over to Nona to go forth with her presentation.
Great. So everybody, you still have the screen share up. Super. All right. Thanks, everyone, and welcome. And I would like to acknowledge that we are all over the world. I shout out to the person from Belize because I was just there in February because my mother lives there. So loved being there. Wish I was there now, I have to say. And also to acknowledge the Indigenous folks whose territory we're on at York University. And if you are also on Indigenous territory, I hope that you have an opportunity to recognize that, and that we all continue to do the work in addressing both historic and current injustices faced by Indigenous and other peoples. So as Reba mentioned, my name is Nona Robinson. I am a relative newcomer to York. I arrived here about 1.5 years ago. Previous to that, I was working in a quite senior position at a small university. And before that, I was in a less senior position at a very, very large university. When you hear Vice-Provost students, that probably doesn't mean very much, but really what that is I sort of oversee student supports. So that ranges from counseling and wellness to athletics to things like orientation, all the different things that really help support your student success at York University. And I also work very closely with faculty members, faculty leaders, because of course, the more we can work with faculty to support your students, the more that they'll be able to get that within a classroom. So, people are like, why are you at York? I was at my previous institution for 10 years and the other one for 12 years. I love coming to an institution, really sort of being fully part of it and really loving it. And I would say, among other things, York is kind of like Goldilocks, because I've been at a large place, I've been at a small place. York, I think, is a really good size. It's big enough to have the incredible range of programs, of academic options, of choices for students, of ways for students to get involved and do various work and all those sorts of things. But it's also small enough and personal enough that students are able to make good connections with each other and with faculty members. And that goes, I noticed people were talking about commuting on campus. That goes for people both who live in residence in first year and also people who commute in first year. And I think a lot of our students do commute because many of our students come from financial backgrounds where they don't have a huge amount of money, so they stay at home, or they live off campus to save money in some cases. Because, you know, if they're commuting from other places, maybe rent is cheaper than in Toronto itself. I will say that it is easy now to get to York campus. The picture behind me is in the York subway station, which I think opened about 5 years ago. There's 2 subway stations on campus. Nobody else has that. And so that really has connected transit to be able to get to York very easily, and a lot of students take transit. I think one of the other things that really drew me to York and again keeps me at York is that this is a community that's really committed to students. It's committed to access. I mean, it's an increasingly prestigious university. You know, it keeps going up in rankings, but what it's never lost is that sort of sense of, you know, we're here to be a place where students can access the university. They can access post-secondary education. Faculty members can care deeply about student success. And, you know, I think there are a lot of folks, it's an incredibly diverse campus, a lot of folks with a wide range of experiences and backgrounds and ages and all of those different sorts of things. And as a result, it's also maybe a little bit less stuffy than a more traditional university. And I really appreciate that. People here challenge preconceptions, they explore ideas. Sometimes for someone who's in administration, that can be a bit uncomfortable because people are in my office saying, why aren't you doing this? But it keeps things very lively and interesting. And I will say, I've been doing family orientations, family and support orientations for many, many years. And so for those of you who are parents or supporters of students, I know that watching your student start university is a very interesting time for you as well. So really in this session, what I'm going to focus on is what are some anxieties that people have about this big change that's about to happen, and what are some ways that to support that transition and make it successful and help your student to connect, and also to help you to be able to address stuff. Now, the slide deck that I'm working off of, I'm for the most part, unless it's a graphic, not going to be putting it up so that you can actually see my face, but hopefully you received it by email. If you didn't, please direct message one of our supporters on this Zoom, and we'll be able to email it to you again, or check your junk mail. And you can follow along if you like. But the other thing about the slide deck is that we very deliberately put in a whole range of the different services and supports. So if you've got questions about things like finances or counseling or athletics or any of those sorts of things, what we've done is we've created a whole list of the different supports, what they're there for, what the links are, so that you yourself can feel as though you have a pretty good understanding of what's available for your student. I'm going to say that, as I said, I've been, it's now 22 years. So in fact, longer than many students have been alive, have been doing these types of orientation sessions. And I have conversations with parents often and with family members often. And what's interesting is I think for a long time, there was a sense that, you know, that once a student goes to university or college, that's it, you know, we're sort of separating out. But what I've learned is just how essential families and supporters are to student success, because in many cases, you're the first people your students are going to be talking to, calling, texting, Skyping, any of those things, Zooming, you know, and if they have problems or issues or anxieties, they're going to be asking you about it first. And so, you know, if you feel confident, you know, what the resources are, that's actually going to be very helpful for you. And I will say, open invitation to get in touch with me directly. I'm the only Nona at York, so I'm very easy to find. If you just sort of Google Nona Robinson at York University, my contact information comes up. I won't be able to tell you anything personal about your student, but I will certainly be very happy to talk to you about what are some ways that your students can be helped or supported, especially if you're worried about them. And, I think there's a bit of a trust your gut thing as well. If you're getting a sense that maybe your student's not doing as well as they should, really encourage them to get help. I will say that for me, I don't like asking for help. I'm very invested in being independent. I think a lot of you students are, because they're just testing the waters of, in many cases, living independently. But what we do know is that students who need help and get help early succeed tremendously well, especially if it's like right at the start, September-ish. The services also aren't as busy then. But if they wait until towards the end of the school term or the semester, what will sometimes happen is at that point, it's much more difficult for them to recover, especially if they're struggling academically. So families will also worry that students won't like their university courses, and that is fine. Students might be picking a bunch of university courses thinking, I really want to do this particular thing, or I've always dreamed of being in this particular position, or this is a program that's going to get me a good job. And then they take some courses and they're like, you know what, this isn't really what I was expecting it to be. You're concerned because they're feeling disappointed. But as I said, especially at a university like York, there's such an enormous range of options that it's very common for students to sort of start looking around and saying, you know what, I think this over here looks way more interesting. I'll let you into a little secret. For an undergraduate degree, unless it's a professional degree like nursing or engineering or something like that, what a student gets their degree in is probably less important than the fact that they got a degree in the first place. If they're looking for a job, employers will be looking for a university degree. They won't be looking necessarily for a university degree in history or a university degree in biology. So it's really valuable for a student to find something that they really enjoy and like and are excited by, because that will really help them to be academically successful. Sometimes also folks will, especially for students moving away, are worried that your student will lose touch, or that you'll lose touch with them, or that they won't communicate very often. Now, when I started university, my mother was still living in Zimbabwe, where my stepfather was teaching. And I'm going to date myself. This was pre-email. This is certainly pre-Zoom. They would write letters to each other. And it took a couple of weeks for a letter to get to her, and a couple of weeks they wrote the answer to get back to me. So if I did something and if she didn't like it, it took about a month before I heard about it, which actually was suited me just fine. These days there's such instantaneous communication. There's calling, there's texting, there's all these different ways that we keep in touch with our students. But sometimes a student will come to university and get really immersed in what's going on, and you're sort of like, wait a second, you're not texting me every day. You're not texting me every night. It's often very helpful to talk about how often you'll be communicating, because you'll still be connected to each other, but the pattern might change a little bit, certainly if they're moving out of the house, but even if they're not. But sometimes we also worry about students not making friends or being isolated. And I think sometimes too, students who maybe struggled socially in high school, or struggled with social anxiety or anything like that, think of university as, everything will be different at university. And very often it is, because now they're in amongst a group of people, all of whom are also motivated academically, and are often very, very keen to talk about really interesting subjects that maybe your student might have struggled to find people who actually shared those interests. I think what's really key with that is for students to look for like-minded people. And we try and create as many opportunities for them to do so as possible. And students themselves create lots of opportunities too. So there's tons of different clubs and groups. I think a lot of students, again, especially if they're commuting to campus, might not take advantage of that as much as they could, but that is probably bar none the best way for students to connect with each other and to make friends. Study groups, meeting up in the library, all of those sorts of things are also really good opportunities for students to connect with each other. On the flip side, we might worry that students make too many friends and that they spend a lot of time partying. And it's interesting because when I was starting university, that was definitely the case. And I went to a school that was kind of known as a bit of a party school. And various of us did not necessarily do as well as we could, because we're actually having such a great time socially that we were maybe not doing as much as we should in terms of studying. I will say the culture for that has changed quite a bit. I think a lot of students are very focused academically. If you're feeling a student's having difficulty maybe prioritizing academics, it's probably a good idea for them to connect with something like an academic advisor, because it may well be that it has more to do with them not feeling it for the actual subject than it is for any sort of partying. That said, there's a balance in everything, and one of the things that students learn in university is really trying to strike the proper work-life balance. We also have lots of supports for healthy eating, healthy living, mental health, all of those things. Sometimes we're concerned that students are going to be disappointed. And again, especially if they haven't had the best time in high school and they're coming to university and they're projecting a lot of stuff about how amazing university is going to be. There will be challenges. University is not set up to be easy. It's set up to challenge the way we think, to challenge our ideas, to learn a lot of new skills. And really what we're trying to do is help students to find the right balance between challenge and support, so that they're able to be challenged and learn new things, but at the same time, they're going to feel as though there's a community that are looking out for them, who want them to succeed. So that it's not that they're all by themselves and they have to struggle all alone, because they don't. That's what we're here for. But we also worry, especially again, if students are moving away, that bad things will happen. And I know for parents especially, and especially if this is the first in your family to go to college or university, it's a big transition for you as well. And it's hard not to worry about it. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with one parent who'd gone through this with a couple of students, and she said that she had a daughter that she worried about a great deal. And at one point, the daughter said to her, "Listen, you're so worried about me that I'm trying not to tell you anything because I know you'll just worry more." And this parent shared with me that hearing that, she realized that that was actually getting in the way of being able to support her student the way she wanted to, and be able to have that open dialogue. So, that part of it is also trusting your student and trusting that they will be successful. And if the reality is that bad things can happen in life, period. Again, there's tremendously great supports available for students on our campuses, and not just at York, at all university campuses. We're all very committed to making sure students succeed. Sometimes also family members like wow, this student start at university and just changed completely. They've discovered new things, they've changed their identities, their politics, who knows? University is often a time when people start exploring themselves, trying on new things, trying on different ideas. Or maybe it's a time when they feel as though they can actually, they've been maybe sort of keeping things quiet to themselves because they're worried about social pressure in high school or something like that. And then they're sort of like, yay, university, excellent. And so again, it's one of those things where it's a bit of an adjustment sometimes for family members, but they're still your student. And so that's the important thing. I'm just going to quickly share the graphic around transitioning. And this is actually an older resource, but I think one that's actually very helpful. Certainly has helped the way I think about stuff, which is that for those of us who are perhaps a bit older, we've been through many transitions in our lives. Whether it's moving, whether it's getting married, or starting a new job, or ending a job, or all sorts of different things. Having kids, losing people in your family, all of those sorts of things. Because we've been through so many transitions ourselves, we have a pretty good sense of what it is that helps us to get through it. And so whether it's our own sort of internal resources, for me, I will often make a list of things that need to be done, and I might not ever look at that list again, but just writing things down actually reassures me. Sometimes, we were used to being able to sort of call on our friends and family for support. If you're moving and you're not hiring a moving company, you call your friends and say, can you help me with this? And they rally around you. It also helps if you're anticipating a transition, like if you've been thinking through how you're going to manage it and think about it, because a sudden thing can often be very shocking, and that's often harder for people to manage. And so how we sort of strategize around that can really be very helpful. So if you're looking at this and thinking about your student and thinking about, okay, well, what are some things that they might struggle with that I can help them with? And what are some things that they're actually going to be just fine with because I have a lot of confidence in them? I think that's, again, a very helpful way of framing it for you, because it's not all about the one great big enormous transition. It might be that that when your student isn't totally sure where they could physically have to go for classroom, they might get anxious. So maybe you encourage them to talk to one of their orientation leaders when they get here, to just tour them around the campus so that they have a sense of where they need to go. It might be that they're really, really good at making friends and socializing, And then you're sort of like, okay, well, why don't you do that and tap into your friends and if you have any issues or problems, you can talk to them. There's all sorts of things, ways of thinking of that as being something where if you break it into that smaller chunks of things as opposed to this great big huge monumental thing, it can actually be really helpful for students. I should also mention, if there's any questions about any of this as I'm going along, feel free, of course, to just throw that in the chat. It's also helpful for families and for students themselves to think about the different areas their students might need to know a little bit more. Is your student feeling confident about their academics? Do you have a sense of how maybe university classes will be different from high school classes? Or, if they're transferring in from a college or from another institution, what might be different at York? Certainly first year classes at university there's going to be some significant differences in that, for example, most faculty members, especially in classes, don't take attendance. They're not going to be standing over your student, making sure they hand stuff in on time. They're going to be actually, your student has to be fairly self-sufficient as far as that goes. Now, most first year classes are structured so that there's a series of smaller assessments so a student can gauge more easily how they're doing. But sometimes students will be sort of like, I don't know how I'm doing compared to everybody else, and maybe start to feel a bit anxious as far as that goes. And that's fine too. They're going to be with a bunch of very high achieving people who are also very academically motivated. And it's not as though they're in competition with each other, because often students are very supportive of each other. But what it means is that the bar is going to be a bit higher than perhaps it was before. And many students thrive with that. Some students are sort of like, okay, I'm actually really nervous that I'm not going to get the grades that I want, especially if they're looking at those grades as being something that they're going to use to get into a different program or whatever. Again, first year is less important. For a lot of professional schools and graduate schools, they tend to focus on the marks later on as opposed to first year marks. And if a student is really struggling academically, there's things that we can do to help to make sure that they're maintaining their GPA and their grade average. I know a lot of students are also, including at York, are worried about finances and financial management. And, for a lot of students, this is the first time they're managing their own money or their own budget. And so that's something that, if they're taking out a loan, or if they're being provided with student support otherwise, they're going to have to learn how to manage that money. So, helping them to learn more about that can be really valuable. I mentioned social connection, that's a big one, and physical and mental health. I mean, I know especially after the pandemic, there's a lot of young folks in particular who had a really rough time for the last number of years. And that's really in many ways impacted people's mental health and sense of well-being. Sometimes also, a major change like going away to university means that people get out of an exercise routine or maybe aren't eating as healthily as they should. So, again, being aware of that and being aware that the more you're able to maintain your physical health, the better it is for your mental health. We have a very close partnership between our athletics and recreation facility and our counseling and wellness services, because we are very keenly aware that those two things are very, very closely linked. Students will also be looking at taking risks. And again, it's going to be a different sort of thing, because in most cases, even if they're continuing to live at home, you'll find they're adults. Maybe the rules are going to be different. Maybe the approaches to risks are going to be different. Some risk taking is a good thing. Possibly your student's risk tolerance is going to be a little higher than your risk tolerance. So, talking with them about, what are some things that you might want to be doing, or that you might potentially feel pressured into doing. What are some ways what are some decisions that you expect you're going to be making can be really valuable, because your student's going to be establishing independence and you want them to. I mean, there's a sort of joke about, people just moving back at home and living in the basement until they're in their mid-30s. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But the reality is, this is a really good transition time for students between living dependently, especially if they're traditional age, like around 18, living dependently with you and living independently and working independently and all those other sorts of things. University is sort of a bridge between those two completely different lives. And that's the transition where the more autonomy they have, the more sense of responsibility they have, the more successful they're going to be. And so we really encourage them to be empowered and to make their own decisions, and as much as possible to learn how to deal with situations will help them. But it's more along the lines of coaching them to be successful. You know, have you tried doing this? You know, what do you think about this? You know, those sorts of things, as opposed to telling them what to do. You know, we're much less likely to do that, simply because every student is different. So these are the sorts of conversations that it's really actually valuable to start having now, because it also sets the stage for your student in terms of them being successful, but also feeling really excited about coming to university and having a better sense of what it's going to be like and what your relationship will be like with them, so that you can continue to have that caring and supportive relationship, but you are also fostering that independence. Sometimes I refer to it as the difference between parenting and coaching. And if you start thinking of yourself as more of a coach, that can sometimes make a useful shift in the way you think of things. So how you manage emotional situations, how you communicate, how often you communicate, any changes to rules. You know, money is a tough conversation. In many cases, we're not really sort of socialized to talk about money, but paying tuition fees and living expenses and all those sorts of things, and you know what those sorts of expenses your student will be able to take on, and how to support them with that, I think those are all very important things. And then the more sort of, I would say, overarching questions, like when they're in university, what do they see as your role? What are they going to be looking for from you? And that might change. So they might have one answer now, and they might have another answer in, say, February of their first year, and then another answer in March of their third year. What are your expectations? What are their expectations? Especially around things like grades. You won't know their grades unless they tell you, because it's, again, private. Some students will give their parents their login information. I strongly urge you to resist that, because otherwise they'll be actually asking you to fill out all the forms for them and things like that. Remember, we're encouraging autonomy, but you know, you don't get mailed their grades or sent their grades. But hopefully you're continuing to have those conversations with them, so you have a sense of how well they're doing academically. If they're struggling, you also have a sense of what the resources are, so that they can get help. If you're starting to worry about them, or if you're starting to not feel confident in their success, and this is a good conversation to have with them now, student, you know, if you're struggling in university, or if I'm starting to worry about you, what would be helpful for you, is a really great thing to ask them. And they won't necessarily know, but they will know that you're open to hearing multiple things from them, rather than just sort of that sort of, I'm going to tell you what to do. Again, that really helps with them developing more coping skills and more coping strategies. And then broadly speaking, what are the future directions that your student will take? You know, many folks these days I think are pressured into specific career choices, feeling a sense of obligation, feeling a sense of urgency. You know, I have to do this in order to get this career, in order to make this money, in order to buy a house, all those sorts of things. There's all these little milestones, which again, you know, it's not new, but I think there's that added layer of pressure because of things like social media. And it's okay for your students to change direction. You know, you want your students to be happy and fulfilled and excited about what they're learning, and also hopefully about the career that they end up doing. But the other thing is, people, you know, this generation of students can be expected to change careers many times, not just jobs, but full-on careers. And I've done that. I'm sure many of us have. But in what we're really focusing on is that your student is learning these amazing transferable skills that they can apply to a whole range of different opportunities. So if their goals change, that's fine, not a problem. You know, as long as they're sort of feeling positive about the changes that are happening, and that they have those goals. I think sometimes families, maybe even faculty and staff, can start thinking of things in a sort of deficit way. You know, your student's not good at this, they're not good at this, they're not good at this, they're going to struggle with this, and that feeds into your worry, and that feeds into maybe them feeling as though you don't have a lot of confidence in them. But I think a different way of thinking about this, and this is actually taken from a counseling approach called strengths-based counseling, is about what are some things that your student is actually really good at. And that will vary. Like all of your students are going to be totally different. So in some cases, it might be they're really amazing at time management. In another case, it might be that they can read something and absorb it very quickly. And so they never really had to study very hard, but they'll probably be able to keep up. And in some cases, they might be really, really good socially. There's a whole bunch of different things that your student is already really good at. And those strengths can actually be translated into strategies for success. So, for example, good time management. That means that they're probably going to be someone that everybody else looks to for advice on how to make sure that you're studying the right things at the right time so that you're not falling behind. Someone who's socially adept is someone who's going to find it much easier to navigate the complexities of universities and university decision making. And again, will probably be a role model for peers and fellow students. Someone who is very diligent would probably find it very easy to get a good campus job and again, be able to learn some really valuable skills through that. So each strength that your student has helps build your confidence in them, but also it helps them you can sort of say, listen, I know you're really good at this particular thing. How would that help you to succeed in this issue that you're dealing with? And that's a way of really affirming their ability to cope in it, which is very powerful. And as I said, it also helps you to worry a little bit less. So sometimes, in parent orientation sessions, I will literally have people say, write down 3 strengths that your student has. And I remember once I saw a parent at convocation 4 years after I'd had that sort of orientation with them. And they literally pulled it out of their wallet and they said, you know what, I've been carrying this around. And the student is sort of like, oh, yeah, this is kind of embarrassing, but whatever. But it was something that really helped that parent remind himself that he needed to have confidence in his students and his students' abilities. So as I mentioned, really it's focusing about moving away from direct intervention and more towards sort of a coaching approach. And for that active listening can be really, really helpful. So if your student is looking a little bit distressed or whatever else, rather than sort of saying, you need to do X, Y, and Z, just sort of talking a little bit about, can you talk to me about what's going on? It looks like you're struggling. Tell me a little bit about what's happening. Validate them. It's like, I know this is probably difficult. So let's talk about, maybe ways that it can be better. Paraphrase for understanding. So it sounds like you're really, maybe just, you don't really like that particular course. What are some things that you've tried so far? Would it help if you talked to an academic advisor, or what are some things that might help you to be more successful, or anything of that sort of thing? So what you're really doing is helping the student to come up with their own answers to stuff. And I say this as someone who really likes giving advice, and I've been working with students for a very long time. So I think my advice is probably fairly good, but that's my advice. That's my solutions, not their solution. If they can come up with their own solutions, it's way more likely that they'll actually be able to implement them and actually be able to seek help if they need to. I mentioned seeking help is hard. Talk about that a little bit. What are some of the ways that getting help might be difficult? What are some things that might be challenging? Are there some things I can help with? And then if they need help, they'll be able to tell you. In some cases, they might just be saying something like, you know what, that's fine. I'm just going to go talk to my faculty member or whatever else. Now, another little secret is that faculty professors have office hours, and what they share with me is students tend not to go to office hours, and they don't even necessarily talk to them at the end of class. And faculty members love talking to students, especially about their subject, keeping in mind these are people who have been studying the subject for, in some cases, decades. They love to talk about that subject. So if a student comes to them and is curious about wanting to know more, or maybe wanting some help in understanding a concept, they're all in helping them out with that. And so, faculty office hours, talking to faculty members outside of class, really encourage your student to do that as well. So as I mentioned, sometimes though, bad things could happen, or you're starting to worry. And as I said, I'm fine with you emailing me or emailing my office. We have a generic VP students email. A number of staff are constantly checking that. So, we will try and get back to you as quickly as possible. We won't be able to tell you personal information, but we will be able to talk to you about what some resources are available for your students. Even if you're just, I don't know what to say, we'll be able to talk to you about that. Because your student will probably talk to you first, as I mentioned at the beginning, long before they come into my office or into the office of any student service, probably, because you're comfortable, you're someone that they're used to sharing stuff with. They'll come to you for assistance, or they'll talk to their friends. And so for me, the more information you have about all of this, and the more confident you feel about being able to get them the help that they need, the more likely it is they'll follow through with that. I will say, we talk about all the different things that are potentially going to be happening with students around, mental health, around, physical health, academic struggles, any of those sorts of things. People get worried because York is actually in a fairly large city. Is it safe? All of those sorts of things. York is safer than walking downtown, but we can't make any promises about 100% safety because it doesn't exist anywhere. Again, we do what we can to build up our students' sense of safety and to give them the tools that they need. But I don't want it to feel like going to university is this terrifying thing. Or that it's going to be a struggle, or that it's going to be really, really hard for your students. For many, many students, university is an amazing time for them, and great things do happen. You will see your student learning and developing new skills and new ideas, and getting involved, hopefully, and potentially getting a job, and all of these things that you're sort of like, this is amazing. Look at you, look at what you're doing. This is so exciting, and that they'll become independent and self-reliant and successful. Hopefully they're excited. Hopefully their excitement lasts. They feel more ready to go out into the world and take on the world and all those other great things. And your pride in them, which is probably already very high, hopefully, will just continue to grow. And I will say that convocation, graduation, is bar none my favorite time, and the most rewarding part of my job. Because I get to be up on the stage and I shake hands with people who are graduating, and I talk to family members, and it's a joyful occasion. And second to that is new student arrival, because they're a little more nervous about stuff. But this is an amazing, exciting time for them. And everything in between can be a wonderful adventure too. So my hope is that I do get an opportunity to meet you, particularly as your student is starting off, but definitely as your student is graduating. And they're crossing the stage, and you're just filled with so much pride for them. This is a really special place, and I'm really hoping that we can welcome a really special student. And at this point, if you have questions, comments, concerns, any sorts of things, I will also say that there are a whole bunch of other family resource sessions that we're doing. I'm just going to throw that quickly up on the screen. And in the meantime, please put questions in the chat if you have them. So just going through what some of these next ones are. We've got video presentations. So I'm just around specific services. So academic support, career support, safety on campus, health and wellness, residence life, and as well, we're providing more support for students who are living off campus, and student finances. And then we're going to have some very specific, more detailed sessions on campus safety and finances, and academic and personal success. And then in August, you're welcome to the York community, as well as as we're starting to really roll out more of our student welcomes. We also will be providing information about all the different student orientation sessions that we're having, many of which are focused on skills that they will find helpful in order to succeed in university. So certainly encourage you to encourage your student to access as many of those as possible. It'll also be an opportunity for them to meet other students, upper-year students who've been through it all before, and in some cases fellow students, just so they can start connecting with people even before they get here. Because we really want them to feel as though they're full members of this really wonderful community of ours. Okay. And I don't know, Ariba or Shay, if there's been any other questions that are.
Yeah, thanks, Nona. So I know a couple questions came in through the direct message chat. I'm going to pass it off to Elizabeth to read one or two of them to you, and hopefully we might be able to answer them for folks in the audience.
For your presentation, Nona. The first question we got is regarding students, and they're just wondering if there's any extra support for students with disabilities.
Right. Yes, there is. So student accessibility services, again, should be listed in the resources in the slide deck. And they provide support for students with physical disabilities, with learning disabilities, with mental health concerns, or students with temporary disabilities. So if someone's been injured or has a concussion. And what they, in fact, I would encourage your student to meet with them as early as possible, including in the summer. Because if they need, and in high school in Canada, it's often called an IEP or individualized education plan. They need a kind of accommodations plan. The sooner that's set up, the better. And what the accessibility services will do is help your student to liaise with faculty to make sure they get the accommodations that they need. And for many students, it's something as simple as having extra time on exams or flexible deadlines or something like that. For other students, they might need more specialized accommodations. I will also add that York has pioneered autism support for students on the spectrum. And so we have a lot of really great autism supports as well.
Great, thank you so much. The next one is there any guidance the university can offer regarding the provincial attestation letter?
Right. So for folks who might be unfamiliar with this, the Canadian government and the provincial government basically have put in a new requirement for international students to get visas, which is an attestation letter that they have been offered admission to the university. We are expecting the provincial government to provide that information pretty much momentarily because they need to do it before the end of the March. So hopefully within the next day or so. And as soon as that happens, you know, we're ready to go. So I ask for a little bit more patience as far as that goes. You know, we're continuing to communicate with our international students about the process and how we can help them to get through it as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you so much. The next one is just, should the ongoing strikes at York University be a matter of concern for incoming students?
Right. Yes, and so again, for folks who are unfamiliar, currently our teaching assistants and sessional faculty members, so the people who are teaching a course at a time, are on strike. You know, many of our courses are continuing, some of them are suspended. We will we will be making sure that any students who are enrolled in those courses are given the option to finish those courses. I have every confidence that that this labor disruption will be over before September. You know, we're seeing some encouraging signs. My fingers are tightly crossed because I also know that it's of worry to incoming students as well as to current students. I will also say that myself and all of my staff, as well as a lot of other folks at the university, are really focusing on supporting students as much as possible through it. So I can't make any promises, unfortunately, but you know, I do know that we are trying to minimize the impact on students because I think that's everybody's first priority.
Great, thank you so much. The next one is just regarding campus. This person is a great fan of natural spaces. Are there many parks near Keele campus or just like any of the York U campuses?
Right. So yes, it's a good point. There's 3 campuses. There's Keele, which is the great big one, which I have in my background. There's Glendon campus, which is basically in a park, and then there's Markham campus, which is in the northern part of the Greater Toronto area, which is more of a building at this point, although we expect it to expand. I spend a lot of time on the Keele campus. My first year here, I actually had an apartment on campus because I was, you know, in order to be, I'm coming from fairly far away. And I'm also a big walker. I try and walk at least 10 kilometers a day. That's what kept me going during the pandemic. And so I love walking around the campus, and there are tons of green spaces. And in fact, the all the way around the campus is about 7 kilometers. So if you imagine that most of that is not buildings, it's you know, there's woods, there's fields, there's lots of spaces. There's even a pond. So it's and the Glendon campus is just lovely. It's got all sorts of different little nooks and crannies as well. So lots of green. And I should also add that, you know, we are keenly aware of food insecurity. We have a community garden that's run by community members. We're looking at continuing to plant more and more trees. We're trying to be a net zero campus and at an accelerated rate. We're actually hoping to do it by 2030. And there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening in that respect. Any other questions?
Great, thank you. Yeah, another one. So this is regarding a student that got recently diagnosed with ADHD. What would they need to do to get an accommodation at York?
Right, so similarly to my last answer around accessibility services, contact student accessibility services. Ask your student too, because again, we're encouraging them to be independent. And if they've been diagnosed and have documentation, that makes it even faster and easier. We have a lot of students who struggle with ADHD, anxiety, in some cases depression, a whole range of different things. So we're very accustomed to helping students, and I will say that different folks with different types of ADHD will have different needs, and one of the things that our folks will work with your student on is really figuring out what it is that they'll need to be successful, especially because in many cases a high school education plan is going to be a bit different from a university education plan, simply because classes and requirements are a bit different as well. So we'll make sure that your student gets the accommodations that they need.
Great, thank you so much. And I believe
Maybe-
the link was just dropped in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just got into the chat. Thank you.
Another question, it's more of a general question. What do weekends at York look like?
Well, the weekends are a little quieter, but there are still classes that take place. There are tons of sports events that take place. A lot of students get very involved in varsity sports or intramural sports, and we've got some really great facilities with that. There's also different social events and things. Some students who live in residence go home for the weekends if they don't live too far away, but plenty stay on campus. So it's not as busy as during the week, but there's plenty going on. The other thing I love about this campus is when I mentioned the subway, there's so much neat stuff that's happening in downtown Toronto as well. And again, best of both worlds. If you're on Keele campus, you hop on the subway, you're right downtown in less than half an hour. And so, if you feel like going to the museum or a concert or whatever, there's all sorts of really great things to do that. I'm not a Canada's Wonderland person, but it's also like literally within eyesight. If you're in a high tower, it's actually quite close to your campus as well. So no shortage of stuff to do socially. And plenty of people spend time on campus studying on weekends, because again, it is a bit quieter. So there's lots of study spaces, and it's actually a really good place if people just want to try and concentrate on finishing an essay or studying for a test or an exam.
Awesome, thank you. This other one is regarding course load. How many courses should a student take during their first year in an undergraduate program?
Right. The normal course load for a full-time student is 5 courses in the fall semester and 5 in the winter semester, which is, I think, 30 credits and 30 credits. York has a credit system. Still wrapping my head around it, because I'm used to just calling it courses. So basically, it's 5 courses. Some students find that to be a lot, especially if they're more intensive courses, and so sometimes it's helpful for students to pick 2 or 3 or 4 courses that they think are going to be more challenging, and then 1 or 2 courses in an area where they're just maybe interested in learning more about it, but they think it's going to be a little bit easier, just so that they've got a bit of balance. Lots of students will drop courses if they're finding them difficult, and if they're on financial aid, they should probably talk to again an advisor while they're doing that, just to make sure that doesn't affect their full-time status. Students with disabilities will also take a reduced course load in many cases, in which case they fully qualify for financial aid anyway, if that's part of their accommodation. Some students will say, okay, you know what, I'm going to dip my toe in a little bit in the fall and take 4 courses, and then maybe enroll for 5, and then take a course or 2 next in the following summer. That's quite common as well. And a few students wouldn't necessarily recommend this in first year, but they find that they're actually really loving their courses, and they end up taking 6 in a semester. More than that's probably too much, but the schedule is again quite different from high school, where it's like you start at a time and you finish at a time. What they'll be doing is they'll be building their schedule, and again, a lot of students also are trying to schedule their classes so that they're taking courses they want to take, but they're taking them, say, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they come to campus on those 3 days. or maybe they take 3 in-person courses and 2 online courses. There's a whole range of different things that students choose to do, both to fit their own schedules and to fit what they want to study. If I were starting off in first year, I would start with 5 courses, and I would really genuinely try and pick the ones that I thought were really super interesting, because that would help me to feel really engaged. Funny story, when I started university, I was supposed to be studying sciences, biochemistry in particular, and I registered for courses. And again, this is the Stone Age, so I'd written them out onto triplicate paper and mailed them. But the registrar had put me in the wrong faculty. So I was in the College of Arts instead of the College of Physical Sciences, and I had to add 5 courses in a very short period of time. So I ended up taking courses like Latin, which I never would have taken in a million years, but I loved it. So, you know, it was one of those things where, great, it was fine, it was fun, I enjoyed it, and I had a great first semester, even though at the time I was like, this really sucks because I want to get into my biology and my chemistry classes. So it's a bit of a wandering answer, but there's no one size fits all. Pick courses that are going to be exciting. That would be my key advice. And the other thing is, if your student can connect with upper year students, especially in the same program, and a lot of the faculties have these sorts of opportunities for students to meet earlier, ask who their favorite faculty members were, or their favorite first year courses. Because getting advice from other students about really good courses can also be really valuable. And I see a couple of our student staff nodding a little bit, because, you know, talking about what courses are really amazing, you know, that's a really great way of connecting with faculty members as well.
Great, thank you. The next person is just asking, do students usually work in their first year, or is it purely just studying?
Lots of students work. Generally we want to make sure that there's a good balance between work hours and study hours, but even with a full course load, working 10, 15, even 20 hours a week is actually quite valuable for students, because it really helps structure their time. I mentioned that, you know, each course is maybe 3 or 4 hours, depending if there's a lab. There's a lot of study time. There's a lot of time when you're not actually physically in class, and that's often a big adjustment for students. So having a job, particularly a job on campus, can be extremely helpful in terms of being able to get students to the campus and get the students in their routine and things like that. Realistically speaking, many of our students also need to work for financial reasons. Where it gets to be a little more challenging is if their work is taking away from their academics, in which case students may decide that they actually want to take a reduced or part-time course load. And that can be a perfectly valid decision. It might take them a little bit longer to get their degree. No big deal. The thing is for them to not, as much as possible, to not have work impact their academics negatively. But some work is always valuable, and many students work on campus in upper years because they don't get the job right away in first year, but we do really try and prioritize having on-campus jobs as much as possible. They're posted fairly consistently on the campus job board, so encourage your student to definitely think about an on-campus job, because it really helps them to feel tightly connected to the campus.
Thank you. Someone is looking to transfer to York, and they will be commuting 2 hours. So they're just wondering how late do most campus events and club events run?
It really varies. There's usually stuff in the evening, but there's plenty of stuff during the daytime too, because if you think about it, if there's a lot of students who are commuting to campus, and student clubs and student groups and sports and everything else want to get students coming out to their stuff, they'll have them during the daytime. So, you know, and that's a long commute. I'm sorry to hear about that, but welcome to York. I'm glad you're transferring to us. Yeah, I think if you look at the different clubs that are out there, if you sort of look at events and activities, we have 2 student centers on the Kiel campus, not just 1, but 2. And there's almost always something going on in both of them. Many of the clubs have offices in one or the other of them, and even just wandering around and sort of saying hi to folks. The first week of classes, or the second week of class, I'm not sure which it is this year, O'Shea might know. There's a great big huge clubs fair on the Kiel campus. There's another one at Glendon, and Markham. They're starting to start up student groups as well. So, it's really, and all of them really hope for it to get students to join, and there's hundreds of opportunities. So one of the questions to ask on that clubs there, even when you're contacting clubs on Instagram or something, is to sort of say, when are your activities? Do you usually have them during the day? Or do you have them in the evenings? O'Shea, do you know when the great big huge clubs fair is?
Yeah, so we have them for the fall semester. We typically tend to have it in the first 2 weeks of September, as well as in the winter semester. We have one in January in the first 2 weeks of the semester as well. When it comes to the spring and summer, while some students are still on campus taking classes, we do tend to have a little bit of the clubs that are active table or be available within Very Hall periodically, and whenever we do, we advertise it within our Instagram channel and our stories, so students can kind of tune in there to see what's upcoming throughout the spring and summer. I want to be mindful for time, so what I'm going to have one of my students do is, if you can put in the new student email address in the chat. For any folks who have any additional questions that weren't answered, feel free to email the new student email address, or you can email Nona directly. Contact information is in the slide deck that was provided earlier. We will pass it on to Ariba to just do a little bit of a wrap up. But before we do, I just want to say thank you, Nona, for presenting today and answering all the questions that you did and stayed for. I think it was really, really helpful. And I think, I hope everyone here was able to benefit and enjoy it. So Ariba, I'm going to pass it off to you just to do a few wrap up questions for all the folks who were able to stay here. I really appreciate it. And if you don't mind, we're going to go back to Menti and answer a couple last questions before we go.
Okay, thanks everyone. It was really great to have this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Nona, again. I'm just gonna share my screen, full screen. So again, if you could just log on to your Menti and input this chat. So join at menti.com and then input 12526279. And just to sort of gauge, sort of how helpful today's session was, we'll ask you to rate your feelings about this, because there is always room for improvement. And that is what we strive to do. Okay. Some responses coming in. I'll just give people a second to get their code in the website and join onto the Menti. It's also in the chat for people that would like the code. Okay, a lot of you found it helpful, which is great. Awesome. Okay, great. I'll sort of be getting into a little bit detail about what we could have done better in the next slide. Sort of ask you for your opinion on that. So I'll actually just move on to that slide now. Very helpful, great. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So what is something that you would like to know more about going forward? Again, this is very helpful for us for future sessions, just so we can gauge the audience, what they would like to know more about. Courses is a great example. It's the majority of your university experience, so we would think that you'd like as much information as possible on your courses. I think there is a word limit, so just be cautious of that. Try to make it as concise as possible. But with courses, departments, there are a lot of departments at York. It'd be great to get some more information on that. Fully hear you there. Residents, scholarships, also great. York has a lot of scholarships, a whole scholarship portal. And we'll definitely be going into detail about that in the future sessions. Again, refer to the PowerPoint that Nona has provided for future events. Meal costs. International support. Schedule is a big one. Scholarships is staying as the big one that people want to know more about going forward. Campus jobs, transition support, housing on and off campus. That's also a great topic. Financial aid for international students, I'm guessing that says. Choosing a minor. Yeah. There will be plenty of events and webinars and information sessions in the future on all of these things. But it's lovely to know about everything that people are interested in learning more about. We'll go on to our last slide, which just lets you know more about the parent and family website. So we have a whole website that's dedicated to any and all information that parent and family would like to know about things offered at York. We also have our Eventbrite page, so be sure to follow us on there and sign up for future events through there. Also follow us on Instagram. We have a little QR code there that you can scan, where we post a lot about any events, webinars, information sessions, Q&A sessions. And Elizabeth will just put those links in the chat for you all. Right there, with the parent and family site that's linked there, and then also the Eventbrite page that's linked in the chat.
All right, great. Thank you, Ariba. So just to wrap up, like Ariba was sharing and Elizabeth was sharing in the chat, all of the information for next steps as far as the parent and family website where you can find all of the upcoming sessions, our Instagram page where you can also find social media content, and our Eventbrite page where you can, going forward, register for all future events are all listed either in the chat or will also be emailed out to folks who register for today's session in a thank you email. So look out for that email and feel free to keep an eye out for all upcoming events. Once again, just want to say thank you for joining us today, and then we look forward to seeing you at any one of our future events in the future. Take care, everyone.